So the first thing I'm going to talk about is really about joining life's dots, helping you to see how yesterday influenced today, which influences tomorrow. In the beginning, we were all born, and every single one of us was born with a purpose. Every single one specifically and individually chosen and crafted. We've got to remember that we didn't just happen, but we were lovingly created to fill a gap in this world that nobody else can fill. So, as I said, part of why I'm so passionate about this is because we all need each other to be all we were called to be, because that's how we will have this wonderful world that we all want. For example, talking about different, and I have to say, how did I get here? I got here from pain, but I got here from overcoming pain and realizing that we don't need to be stuck in the place of pain, but that healing is possible for each one of us. Freedom is possible for each one of us. And so, if we're talking about everybody being their best selves, as I said, we're formed, we're created for that purpose. But what happens? I call it life happens. What do I mean? Right from when we're conceived is when some of these wounds can actually start in our lives. And it's very interesting because a lot of this content is not just, because I read it in a book. Some of these is because I actually have real life experiences. And so, you know how when a woman is pregnant, they say she shouldn't drink or she shouldn't smoke because it affects the fetus. So does the atmosphere that pregnant woman is living in. So if that woman is living in a home where she feels unsafe, or through work she's feeling extra stress, or whatever it is that she's experiencing, it's transmitting to that baby in her stomach. So some people are born already with life's wounds because of what they were experiencing. And something really fascinating that I learned, I was watching something that said that the emotions a woman feels when she's pregnant can actually have physical manifestations in the child. But what was so fascinating when I watched that, I probably was breastfeeding a child as I watched that, sorry, TMI. And when I was pregnant with that child, I suffered deep grief. And they said that grief relates to the chest. And interestingly, that child spent their first 5 days in ICU with a congenital chest infection. So I realized that, this thing is not just people, whatever, this is real stuff. And there's been times in my life when I felt led to ask my mum, what was going on with you when you were pregnant with me? And it's been, some of the stuff, and I felt leading to ask her twice. First time I got a bit of information. Second time I got so much stuff. And so when I've been on my healing journey, I haven't just started from what happened when I was 7 or 9. I've actually gone to stuff that was happening when my mum was pregnant with me. So I encourage all of you, if your mum is still around, just ask her and see. My mum isn't around, it's a bit, but thankfully I got some of what I need. Then birth. Some people have traumatic birth experiences. As they were coming out in this world, we all know different people. Some people, their mothers passed away at birth. And that creates trauma. And trauma creates a wound. So I want you to think of yourself as being in 3 parts. There's your body that we all see. There's your soul, and we'll talk more about it, which is your your inside being, and within your soul is your spirit. And a lot of what I'm talking about is about wounding to the soul. But we live from the place of our souls. So when our souls are wounded, we are literally doing life wounded. Then infant maternal care, and I'm going through all this detail so that it just gives you a flavor of how different things can affect us and we don't even realize. When I was having my children, you had this thing that was very popular, this book, and I shan't name it, but where it focused a lot about training your child, but as in training your baby so that even if the baby is crying, basically you're trying to get your child into this routine, and you want to get your child into this routine very quickly. But that also means that in so doing, you're not always meeting the needs of the baby. So the baby could be crying, but you're told, no, leave them in a darkened room. And we're going to talk about desire. So imagine as a baby, it could be that you're hungry, or it could be that you're soiled, you need some attention, but you're left in a darkened room because that's just how, they're trying to train you. So you begin to get messages that my needs don't matter. And I say all this, I'm a mother, and my conclusion is by the time a child reaches a certain age, I should just send them for inner healing, knowing that it's just because none of us are perfect. As a result, in raising our children and everything, there are things that we'll do, some of it from even our own woundedness. But there is hope. There's healing and there's freedom, and we'll talk about it. Family life. I like giving an example of a set of twins, Taiwo and Kehinde. They live in this home where their parents are very, very critical. So Taiwo just decides that, you know what? There's nothing that I can do to please my parents. So I'm not even going to bother. So Taiwo does life, just middling, mediocre right through life, doesn't do particularly well in school, decides that, and because she doesn't do particularly well in school, she decides she doesn't bother going to university, so doesn't get the kind of job she wants, etc. And just makes sort of mediocre choices in life. Kehinde, on the other hand, decides that, you know what? I'm going to earn these people's love. I'm going to earn their approval. So Kehinde is working super hard. And Kehinde is that straight A star student, the prefect, the this, that, and the other. And it's like, she's killing it. Gets the awesome job, is an absolute workaholic. Because Kehinde is trying to get the approval of her parents. It's just ingrained. But she doesn't realize it. She's just doing. So you have the set of twins. They have different outcomes from the same set of circumstances. So that just tells us as we're doing life, the same experience can be interpreted in different ways by different people, and it affects them differently. Welcome to those who have just joined us. I just want to say that there's a sheet in front of you, and as I'm talking, different life experiences, different people, situations, etc. will come to mind. Just remember, make a note of it, and we'll talk about how we use it later. School. Were you the one doing well? Were you not the one doing well? I was listening to something, and this lady was talking about when she went to school, and they used to publish the names of the first 3 people and publish the names of the last 3 people. And I sat there and I immediately knew shame must have come upon those people who were the last 3. Because it is being done to humiliate them. So they are humiliated. And they could be carrying this shame over their entire lives, and they don't realize. Or are you the one who just wasn't popular in school? You know what I mean? Or you're not, there's a particular school that the groups were divided. There were the bubblers and the slackers. I'm sure if you went to that school, you know, you know. And then relationships. Yesterday I was watching a video by this lady who was talking about how her marriage broke down. And she realized that somebody she had considered a friend, who had been to their wedding, who had been coming to their house, eating at her table, was having an affair with her husband. Not only did they have that affair, they even went on to marry. Just imagine the kind of pain that person must have experienced. Imagine the kinds of things she must have told herself about who she is and about her worth. But these are real life experiences. There's work. My first job, I trained as a chartered accountant. For me, nightmare. I was auditing. I hated it. And I did not thrive. And it was only about 3.5 years later, but I had to do this because it was tied to my work permit in the UK, etc. There was just no escaping. About 3.5 years later, I'd finished my qualification, and I did one of these personality tests, the Myers-Briggs test. I don't know if anybody knows it. And when I did it, it was like a light bulb moment. I was completely unsuited to auditing. Completely unsuited. But during that time, I just felt, it really knocked my confidence because I was doing this thing and I wasn't doing well, and it made me feel small, it made me feel incompetent, etc. So, you know, again, negative self-narratives begin to form based on this experience. Illness, sometimes your illness, sometimes it's family members. There are people, there are families where maybe one person's, maybe the sibling's illness affects the dynamics of the entire family. Loss. I did these slides a while ago, but I am dealing with loss because my mum passed away unexpectedly at the beginning of the year, and that knocked me. But I will say that I recognize that because I was in a relatively whole place, even though it knocked me down, but it didn't knock me out, if that makes sense. And, you know, I grappled with it, I'm still grappling with it, you know, truth be said. But it got to April. So Omotola works with us at Wholeness. Give them a little wave. She's the one behind the scenes doing a lot of the work. And once my mum passed in early January, I said, Omotola, this quarter, I'm doing nothing. I'm just trying to get myself going again. In fact, Ita helps with all the website and all the designs and everything you see. That's Ita. And Hitu's like, oh, you know, what's the plan for, you know, the next few quarters and everything? I'm like, Ita, there's no plan. There's nothing happening. But by the beginning of April, I realized, Sonia, you have to pick yourself up again. It's time to move forward. Now, I'll talk about something else. After, you know, we buried my mum at about 2.5 weeks after she passed, because we don't take a long time. And this lady said to one of my siblings, okay, it's now time to move on. I'm like, move on. Is it that our pet died? Or is it that our mum? And I've got to say, we had one of the most loving mothers possible. You know, that mother who, even if she has her wahala, and you know, guys, I know I'm a mother, you think I have my wahala, but honestly, I love you too. But even though she had her wahala, but that woman who you knew was praying for you, that was in your corner. Like, when she passed, one of the feelings I felt was just, I felt naked. I felt vulnerable. I felt exposed because that woman who was a covering has gone. But you take the time, and this is for all painful life experiences, that's why I'm sharing it. It's important that you take the time to acknowledge the pain and process the pain. You can't rush grief. I would love to rush grief, but you can't. But you also can't stay stuck. There comes a time where it's important to move forward. And what's the difference between moving on and moving forward? To me, moving on is without processing a painful experience. You just try and just put it in a box and go. The truth with pain is, until it is addressed, it is there. It remains there. And the only way I can put it is, it's like having a trash can in your heart. And it's smelling. It's smelling through the words we speak, our actions, our behaviors, our decisions. And you might not know what that trash is. Other people might not know. So they're saying, they'll just say, this person, she's just somehow, he's, like this or whatever. But they don't realize what it is that is going on within that person that's affecting them in that way. So moving on means you just try and suppress it, keep it there, and soldier, but you're soldiering on wounded. Moving forward is when you acknowledge that, you know what? I do have this pain. I'm carrying this pain, but I'm not going to stay stuck. I'm going to choose to move forward, but over time, letting go of this baggage. So it's almost like you put a hole, it's like you have a bucket with sand, and you put a hole in it. And as you move forward, the sand is coming out. The pain, the baggage, it's whatever. You're emptying, you're moving into freedom. But you're not pretending that the painful experience didn't happen. So all these things that happen in our life's journey, the way it works is, it forms wounds. I should also talk about, honestly, I'll say Pursuing Wholeness is 12 modules. And it's like about 12 hours of recording that I'm trying to condense into about an hour and 10, 20 minutes or something. But each one of us is born with 16 natural desires. Like the desire to be recognized, to be loved, to be approved of, to feel significant, to have peace. And we need those desires met. We need them filled in our lives. But again, especially during our childhood, a lot of those needs were not met. And when they weren't met, we formed beliefs. Beliefs like, oh, I am not worthy, or I am small, or there's nothing I can do that is right, or just, I am not competent. So many different beliefs. And we also make determinations about what we think is important and what's not important in life, our values. They all form from those experiences. And it's from those beliefs that we do our lives, that we make our choices, our decisions, our actions. Other life-happening situations, finances. How strained were finances when you were growing up? Because you find that people who, if things were really, really tight, they can, if they're not coming from a place of wholeness, they can swing in two ways. They can either just be like really stingy, they're scared to spend money. It's like the money, to spend it, the money, they squeeze it so hard, the money is crying. Or they flip to the other side, where it's like, I have landed. You people, you will know. So everything is just like, they've got the bling and everything, because you must know that the Sonia Day off that was struggling in her childhood, she's in a different place. Agbabola. That's the situation. National security. Due respect to our beloved land. But sometimes it's just traumatic. The economy, the security situation, so many different situations. And I know that living here, sometimes people just feel like they need to come up for air. It's like everything is weighing us down. Some people say, okay, I can travel, but most people can't afford to just travel. Even sometimes if you want to go to your village, you're concerned about the security. Or you're concerned about, quote unquote, your village people. You know what I mean? There are all these things that just affect us. The economy, yes, we shall move on very swiftly at this particular time. You know, even your neighborhood, where you grew up, all these things affect who you are today. It's just that most of us aren't conscious. Now, the painful seeds of life then grow into bitter fruit. This looks very busy, but bear with me, I'm just going to talk you through it. You need to start at the bottom, the experiences, because what I'm trying to show here, you know, I said it's about joining life's dots. I want to show you how certain experiences then manifest into life outcomes. So the experience of being beat by a teacher for every wrong answer. So some of these I experienced, some of these I didn't. But I'll give you an example. That beat by a teacher for every wrong answer, that was me. That was me in reception, aged 4. And when you do your work, after it's been marked, you take it to her, you all stand in a line, you take it to her, and she has a ruler, and for everything you got wrong, you got 1 stroke. Well, you know, for anybody who's grown up in Africa, you know, beating and everything seems normal, right? I was probably in my mid-30s where I realized that fear was an issue in my life. I needed to deal with fear. So I took time to explore the different types of, because there are many different fears that we have. Fear alone is a separate module. Begin to say, okay, where did these fears come from? And I realized that one of my fears was a fear of failure. And I could trace it back to age 4, because with that experience, the belief that was formed was failure means punishment. But anybody who's an adult, which is pretty much all of us, realize that in life you must take risks. If you're trying to do business, you must take risks. So how are you going to take risks if you're scared of failure? So this is how you as a business person can be affected by these beliefs. Some people would be scared of getting married because maybe they grew up where the parents were always fighting. And they just form the mental belief that marriages never work. We carry them subconsciously. That's the fascinating thing. All these beliefs, it's in the subconscious. It's only when we pause, and that's why I'm going to get you to do some reflections here and reflections at home, because you need to pause and listen to yourself, because yourself, your inner self, your soul, is constantly talking to you. For example, with your emotions, that's your soul talking to you. But for example, often we try and suppress emotions, especially if they're negative emotions. The emotion is not the problem. The emotion is telling you that there's something to attend to. So suppressing your emotion is like if a fire alarm goes off here and then we just turned it off. Will that make sense? The fire alarm is telling us something is happening. Think of your emotions as a fire alarm. And then say, okay, what are you trying to tell me? So I'll give another example before we go to the emotions. Financial or political instability. Based on what's happening, you can just decide that, you know what? I can't trust God to take care of me. So I must either take care of myself or I am vulnerable. So you're just fearful. You're just anxious because you just think anything could go wrong at any time. And you're constantly looking for where it's going to go wrong. Sexual or physical abuse. 1 in 4 Nigerian women, or not 1 in 4 Nigerian girl is sexually abused. 1 in 10 Nigerian boy is sexually abused. So this is real, guys. You know, I said my journey was birthed from pain. One of it was actually sexual abuse. that I had to, and the thing is funny, you know when I talk about the subconscious, I was at university probably about 20 and I was speaking to a friend and she said to me, you know, this was in England, it's like, oh, so many black women I know have been sexually abused. And I'm like, I don't know anyone who's been sexually abused. And as I said it, it came back to me. That means I had suppressed it. And I wasn't just abused by one person, I was abused by two separate people. Yet I was there thinking, I don't know anybody who's been sexually abused. Suppression and repression is a way we use to cope with certain painful experiences. It might work for a while, but it comes to a time where it stops working. So when I realized that, the only way I can say is the thing started doing me somehow. That realization just really affected me, and and I couldn't, it just refused to go back in. I couldn't suppress it anymore. So by about age 24, 25, where I needed to process this thing, I went to a group counseling session. And I learned one of the most fascinating things, that a lot of my personality traits that I thought were just soyade were typical hallmarks of an abused person. And that's when I realized that actually a lot of who we are, it's not because that's how we were created. That's what we have become based on life experiences. So again, that just brings fear, right? Like fear for life. I've just focused on the underlying fears. There are different emotions, different beliefs. But because fear can be so prevalent, that's why I focused on it. And I've already given the example of critical parents or distant parents. We live in a society where we've structured things, and I know it's in the world, but a lot of places in the world, but very much here, where it's like the mother takes care of the children, and all the father needs to do is provide. As long as school fees have been paid, Abby, rent, there's food in the house, so what are we talking about? I've done my job. But here's the thing. God didn't make a mistake when he gave each person a mother and a father. Now, I know that real life happens. My parents got divorced. So this is not to idealize the world, but this is saying true talk. The mother brings some things to the children, like the nurture, the care, the teaching. And the father brings something else. Provision, yes. Protection, yes. But the father also brings identity. And identity is one of the most important things in our lives. Who we believe we are. Because it's who we believe we are, that's how we're going to show up to the world. And we get that from our fathers. And I can say, if anybody who's a mother here and they thought they could do everything, I remember when I realized that, with all my effort, the identity still comes from the father. It's just the reality. Your surname, when you were born, typically it's your father's surname. That's just how things were functioned. But equally, our identity should come from God. Because he's the one who created us. He is the ultimate father. And he's the one who defines who we really are. Nothing else. But we live in a world where we take our sense of identity from, are you fine or are you not fine? Do you have money or don't you have money? What bag are you carrying? And we use all these trappings. But they're empty. We're trying to fill desires that these things cannot fill. Status, position. A, they don't fill. 2, they're transient. Whatever position you're in now, I have to tell you, it will not last. Why? Because either you will leave that job or you will die in that job. But what is certain is it will not be forever. So all these different experiences, as I said, we form beliefs and we have these fears. Fear of rejection. When I read about rejection, that's when I realized how potent and powerful this fear is. And we don't realize, and it's honest, we're always, but it's, you remember I said the natural desires, one of the natural desires is that desire for acceptance. But when you accept yourself and you feel whole and you feel good about yourself, you're less fearful about what other people think of you. So all these things then lead to different emotions. And I put them across because the truth is it then becomes a cocktail of emotions. It's not just a linear thing. And then behaviors. So what you and I often see, well, not whatever, as we engage with each other, we don't see everything under here. We just see the life outcomes and the behaviors. And we have no idea of all the things that have gone on in their lives and all the things that continue to go in within that's affecting the behaviors that we see and the life outcomes. Here's the thing. Emotional pain, when left unaddressed, can lead to physical health challenges. So this is not just a nice to have. This is a need to have. Because these experiences, I cannot overstate how it affects every single area of our lives. It affects our relationships, how we present with friends, how we present with our co-workers. As I said, it affects our health, it affects our finances, because if we're making, for example, that hugely risk-averse person is not growing the business the way they should grow the business, which has financial implications. I was slightly ahead of myself. Hopefully some of you have heard about the life wheel, the wheel of life. And it has 8 different aspects. So I'll start at the bottom. As I've said, health, wealth, I've actually spoken about it, growth, career and learning, whether you're growing as a person. If you're not growing, it's just a sad place to be honest. We need to keep learning, we need to, I realize, I must admit though, you get to a certain age, and I'm not justifying it, but why is it like our parents used to ask us to change the channel on the TV? And why do I now in the office, when it's time to set up certain presentations, just say, please, I beg, just call IT? Because it's important, though, that we keep learning, because the world is changing, and if we don't learn, we will get left behind. Our ability to make a difference in community. The truth is, the world needs each and every one of us here, and the world needs us to be firing on all cylinders. Because think about it, if I had allowed myself to be stuck in grief, we wouldn't be here today. I needed to pick myself up and be going, and at least over a period of time, know and trust that I would be fully whole from that grief. Connection, our ability to form connections. We all know people who struggle. They struggle with relationships. They struggle to trust. They've been hurt in the past. So they've built walls around their hearts. But the problem with walls is it not only keeps certain pain out, but it keeps pain in, and it stops love and goodness from coming in. So these walls that we have built, we've essentially created prisons for ourselves. And it's time we begin to chip at them bit by bit. Yes, I think I've covered all of that. So, to breakfast.